Good morning, everyone. My name is Jón Sigurðsson. I'm the Consul and Trade Commissioner for Iceland in North America, and also the Managing Director of the Icelandic American Chamber of Commerce. Just a few household things. We are going to have two speakers in the first part of this conference, and then a panel, and then a coffee break at 10:30, and then we have the second section of this conference, which is one speaker and then a panel after. I would like to start by thanking our sponsors, our valuable sponsors who have made us possible to have this as a free conference. Icelandair, Eimskip, Siggi, Össur, Highliner Foods, and Century Aluminum. Next I would like to welcome to the podium Jón Sigurðsson, our chairman of the Icelandic American Chamber of Commerce and president and CEO of Össur.
Thank you, Hlynur. Dear friends and distinguished guests, it's a great honor to open this conference on gender equality in cooperation with Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. This is a very important issue, and it is close to our hearts. We have very many great presenters here today, and I'm looking very much forward to very interesting next hours. As a CFO of Össur, this topic is very important to me personally. We have 2,300 employees around the whole world, and we are working very hard to set a positive example by promoting a culture of equality in our organization. And gender equality is one of the most important of those. As one of the very few male speakers today, I want to stress that gender equality in the workplace should be equally important to men as it is to women. If we don't fully utilize the talent and leadership of women, we will be selling our companies and investors short. Not just our female workers. Until we capitalize on the potential of all women at all levels of our organization, we don't stand a chance to reach our earning potentials, which are, as a CEO, I know they are very tough, and I always think they are. We know that companies are best promoting women outperform their industry median with higher profits. At Össur, we have seen from experience that diversity including gender diversity, is an important ingredient to innovation and creative problem solving, which are the keys to our success. Research opportunities and research support those findings. At a first step in bridging the gender gap, I believe it's vital for organizations to assess where they stand and promoting and compensating women. It's important to look at the hard data rather than just perceptions, because a lot of times things are driven by I think, we think, and so on. That's not good enough. At Össur, we have participated in equal pay and audit conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers. The audit analyzed the gender wage difference within the company. We are proud that Össur received the gold standard for compensating both sexes with equal pay for comparable work. While gender equality is foremost about fairness, we have also made it a key part of our strategy at Össur. We have begun an organization-wide women initiative to provide support for the professional growth and development of women at Össur. The goal of this initiative is to increase the number of women in leadership positions. To me, it's just a common sense that the women and men should have equal opportunities, and to me there are not female employees and male employees. There are just employees. Gender equality is not only fair and according to our values as a company, it also makes completely economic sense to utilize the skills, strength, and the knowledge of all employees. I'm looking forward to our next hours here together, learning more about this important topic. And now I'm really proud to present Nancy Ploeger. She's a president Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, which is our great partner in this venture here.
Thank you so much for coming out on this misty after 6-inch rain day, night, morning. It was very amazing to look out the window this morning. You couldn't see the tops of any buildings. So we do appreciate you coming out. Obviously, it's an important topic for all of you to have gotten up on a day like this and this early to come here, and we're really looking forward to hearing from all our speakers and panelists today. This is going to be an interactive session, especially with the panelist session. We are going to have a couple of questions, but then we want you to be involved in the conversation. So please have your thoughts ready. When you hear something, we'll have a little bit of a moderated Q&A so that we can also get your feedback. I see many of our partners and folks here that I know from the whole equality issue and have worked with them over the last several years on many of these issues. I must say it was very refreshing. I've been working with Hilner for several years now, and was very refreshing for him to call me up and say, Nancy, I think we should have an event on gender equality. I'm like, really? So to have a man call me and talk about that, it was very refreshing, trust me. So we want to thank our partners who are working with us today, the American Scandinavian Foundation, and this is a great building, and we thank them so much for hosting, and of course the Icelandic American Chamber of Commerce, and all of the partners and sponsors that are with us today. We really appreciate this. We know that this is a very big issue, not just in Iceland, not just in the US, but in many emerging markets across the world. Our chamber works with We Connect, works with the Women Presidents Organization, works with a lot of different women's organizations to further best practices and help, especially with emerging markets, and help those folks to understand what successes we've had, how we've gotten there, and how they might take it back to their own country to help to further the women's issues and women's inclusion in many things, whether it's contracting, government, business, and so forth. Many of you may or may not know, but our own U.S. State Department has something they call the International Visitors Program. And what they do is they invite people, men and women, from different emerging markets to come to the U.S. to learn about those best practices. Sometimes it's educators, sometimes it's politicians, and a lot of times it's women business and women's issues. What they do generally is they bring a group to Washington. They talk about the whole policy issues and programs that happen in our country and how they're all rolled out. They may take them to Los Angeles to see what it's like on the coast, how business is done there, what kinds of interaction they have with the women's business community, or again, the educational community, and then they bring them to New York. And several times when they come, they call me up and say, Nancy, would you be able to host and speak to a group that's focused on XYZ? And whatever that group is, I then invite some of our members or other women organizations, if it's a women's issue, to join in the conversation. And just recently, we hosted an event with 6 young women from Saudi Arabia. And these women all have full-time jobs, some working at Microsoft, some working at IBM, but they have such passion about women in that country and trying to elevate their status in several fronts that they started their own women's business organization. They have 6,000 women businesses from all over Saudi Arabia, and they were smart. They asked really good questions. Hopefully we gave them some great things to take back to the country. And I was so impressed because they've got to be working 24/7. But they are so dedicated that they really want this to happen in Saudi Arabia. And of course, they were sitting and talking to us in regular, normal street clothes. And when we went to take the official picture, they said, please, we have to put our scarves on. for our government, we still have to wear our headscarves. So that was very telling for us. They were very gracious, but very, very smart, and you know they're going to make a difference. So our country is doing this. Obviously, we've made a lot of strides. Iceland was far ahead of us, but the emerging market is like where we were 20 years ago. So we're really keen on helping all of those countries really understand our best practices. We still have our challenges as well, as you all know. The equal pay issue is very much on the forefront right now. So we hope that you enjoy this morning's conference. Just a bit of housekeeping again. We hope that you will turn off any beepers. As they say in the theater, unwrap your noisy candy papers right now and turn off your cell phone ringers so that we please don't have any interruptions. And again, I would like to thank our partners. Enjoy the morning, and we will see you at the break and afterwards, and we look forward to your interactive conversations with us as we move forward.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a picture of the situation in Iceland and try to explain what we have done to become #1 in the world on the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index. Iceland has topped the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index for the last 5 years. And we are, of course, very proud of this and determined to stay there, but we have got some competition, especially from Finland and Norway. And things, of course, go both back and forward. Well, the main reasons for this top position are equal rights and equal opportunities in education, health, and in women's success in politics for the last 30 years or so. It's the labor market which is our weakest side, and I will come back to that later. And of course, Iceland is not a paradise, neither for men or women. There are many things we need to improve as in other countries. And the methods that have been used, it's important to have this in mind, because I know there are differences between Iceland and the United States, not only in the size, but in how things are done. And in Iceland, we have strong legislation, and I think we can say that men and women are equal when it comes to legislation. Of course, something may come up that we don't realize today, but the main rule, and it's written in the Constitution, that men and women should be equal in every way, every field of society. And we have built up institutional mechanisms, which is the Ministry for Welfare, which is responsible for gender equality. The Center for Gender Equality is responsible for monitoring the law. And there is the Gender Equality Complaint Committee, where individuals can take their cases and then go to the courts if necessary. And there is the so-called Gender Equality Council, which is a kind of an advisory body for the minister. Affirmative actions have been used, positive duties, what we call positive duties on the labor market. It's written in the Act on Gender Equality that all companies with 25 employees or more, they must have a gender equality plan, which includes, among other things, equal pay for equal work, actions against sexual harassment, and so on. And we have used quotas. There is, in the Act on Gender Equalities, there is Article 15, which says that in every public, on every public board, committee, or whatever it is, there should be at least 40% of either sex. And recently, an act on corporate boards, private and in the private market, says that there has to be at least 40% of the members of the boards of either sex in companies which have 50 employees or more. And this is starting to work, and we are already seeing improvements. And then, of course, there have been through times. This is a long story. I'm not going to go through it all. There have been actions by the women's movements, lobbying, and different kinds of pressures. And of course, we have our international obligations, which I think we are going to discuss a little bit later. I'm talking about CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of all kinds of discrimination against women. We are also bound by the EEA agreement. Iceland is a part of the European Economic Area and the Council of Europe and so on. There are many international obligations which of course are very important. I mentioned that there has been great progress in politics. It started in the 1980s with the Women's Alliance, the Women's Party, which had a great influence on increasing the number of women. And in this picture you can see how the situation was in 1979. Women were 5% of the members of parliament, and then it rose to 15%, and has been, well, going a little bit up and down, and went down in the last elections from 43% to 40%, which was disappointing. Here you see the local governments. It's the same story. In 1982, a Women's Alliance started running for local elections. This was an action pushing for seeing more women in politics, and also, of course, having women's issues that were important for women and for the families, of course, and for men as well. So these are our examples of actions that have been used in improving the situation. Here you see a pictures of, it's important to have in mind how families are in Iceland. And we have, a lot of people think that families with children are the biggest part of families, but it's actually married couple without children. It's not a great, and when I'm talking about children, I'm using the definition of the United Nations. It's up to 18 years old. But what's interesting and different from many other countries is the number of mothers with children. This is quite a large group looking at families. We have to have this in mind, thinking about what has been done to improve the situation of families. And what is significant for Iceland is the participation of women on the labor market. It's among the highest in the OECD countries. And 65% of women on the labor market have a full-time job, and 86% of men. and that means that 35% of women have a part-time job, 13% of men. Well, it's 87% of men who have a full-time job. And the average working hours per week are 35 hours for women and 44 for men. Well, I don't know if these are high figures. It's quite high compared with the other Nordic countries. I don't know how it is, but still this shows that men, they still work more hours than women. And here you see how the development has been on the labor market. And it's interesting that the participation of women is fairly high, looking back to the 1920s and the 1940s. But the big step is between 1960 and the 1960s and the 1980s. And it has been quite steady since for the last 15 years or so. And this is due to the fishing industry, which needed women's workforce, women's work. And then between 1960 and 1980, there was an enormous economic growth. The public sector was growing. The baby boom generation was coming into the schools. There was need for teachers, for nurses, for all different kinds of services. And the workforce was found among the women. And, well, I'm going to mention it that there is a difference between the Nordic countries and the United States, that the Nordic countries, they took up or developed the so-called two breadwinner model. Instead of like Germany and I think the United States, stressed the one breadwinner model. And this meant that having women out on the labor market, services, social services needed to be built up, like daycare centers or preschools. And one of the things that followed was the parental leave, which is also quite special for Iceland. I don't know how much you know about it, but it's a system that we call 3+3+3. Mothers have 3 months, fathers have 3 months, and it's non-transferable, and then they can share 3 months. And there's a picture of this later on, showing the development. The last government was going to change the system into 5+5+2. It would have been very interesting to see how it had worked. If it might have been more difficult for men to take a paternal leave for 5 months, it would have been very interesting. But this has been postponed. It's very expensive, and we are dealing with economic crisis as most other Western countries or even the whole world. And I like to draw your attention to the last point here, that 79% of children between 1 and 2 years old attend preschool, and 95% of children between 3 and 5 attend preschool. This has taken time to build up. This has taken a lot of pressure. But now it's the municipalities that have the legal duty of building up preschools for children. And I think, and I'm sure the Icelandic parents who are in here, they agree with me that these are very good schools. They do a very, very good job. Well-educated people working there, they do a tremendous job. So here you see a picture of the parental leave, and what was amazing was the participation of fathers. It began with the fathers having 1 month, then the next year went to 2, and then to 3, and the participation of fathers have been amazing. I can say that it's amazing, and I think that nowadays or even not young fathers, they look upon it as their duty to take parental leave. It can be different how much they can take, and women usually take full leave. So, looking back at history, we can say that Iceland has gone through a transformation in the last 50 years or so. And of course, as I mentioned, one of the main reasons, of course, is the economic growth. And women have contributed greatly to this growth. And I have mentioned this, that both the private and the public sector needed people into the workforce, and the women's movements, which have always been quite strong and active in Iceland. They are not very visible at the moment, but they are there. They have pressed on equal rights, on equal opportunities in education, and in having a full-time job. Just like to tell you an example of a very special affirmative action in 1957, as far back as in 1957, the parliament decided that married women, they only had to pay a 50% tax, married women. And so single mothers, they had to pay full tax. This was an affirmative action, trying to get women into the labor market, but it was terribly unfair. It was so unfair. And when the Red Stocking movement came up in the early 1970s, they protested against this, and the law was changed. But this is early 1957, this affirmative action. And we have had legislation on equal pay for equal work since 1961, and the Act on Gender Equality since 1976. It has been revised many times following the development of the United Nations. Or the women's conferences, UN women's conferences have had great influence on our legislation and action plans and so on, the Beijing platform for action and so on. And our Act on Gender Equality has mainly focused on the labor market. It also includes education and advertisements and so on. But it's quite an extensive legislation. And here you see a picture of one of the most famous actions of the women's movement in 1975. It was celebrated in 2005 and 2010. It will be celebrated in 2015. And the women's movements have used such opportunities to, stand up and say, where are we now? What do we need to improve? What are our challenges? And yes, I'm going to go through this is of course the educational system and loans for all students was one of the, from my point of view, one of the biggest steps towards gender equality. It gave both women and men the opportunity to go to university and get those loans. You didn't have to rely on your parents. And so I'm coming to the challenges. What are our challenges now? And although there is such participation of both men and women on the labor market, women, they still bear the double burden. The work at home is not equal at all. We have many researches showing that, sharing how people share their housework. And the labor market is very gender segregated. There's a new research comparing this in the Nordic countries, and Iceland is even more gender segregated than the other Nordic countries. It would be interesting to compare with the United States. And the reason for this is how big the public sector is. The schools, women are in the schools, they are in the healthcare system, they are in different services, they are taking over in the universities. I will show you a picture of that a little bit later on. And we can say that we still are dealing with the gender pay gap. It's difficult to measure. It's somewhere between 8 and 16%. We have not comparable research. The government is now working on a comparable standard. In Iceland, the government is also working on implementing the so-called equal pay standard for bigger companies. I think Össur is probably taking part in that. And and one of our challenges and really a growing problem is the gap in education. And I'll show you. I'll find the picture. Here you see a picture. It's at the top there is the university education, and 41% of women have got university education in the age of 25 to 64. 29% of men. This is quite a gap, and really it's very important to look at this. What is happening, and what will this mean for the future? Why are there's dropout of boys, and while the women they continue? And what is it? What's going on in the schools that is causing this? And the gender segregated labor market is a challenge. There are projects going on now. And of course, I haven't mentioned violence against women, which is a problem as well comparable with violence in other countries. There we have research on that, and we have interesting projects combating violence against women, which I can tell you about later if you're interested. And of course, one of the challenges is how to involve men in the debate on gender equality. Gender equality is both about men and women. And there was a project run by the Ministry of Welfare on men and gender equality, coming up with many suggestions, which have not been followed up yet. Very interesting report, and I hope it will lead to something. They did, among other things, look at men's violence, men on the labor market, risk behavior, and different interesting things. So, here you see a picture of the gender pay gap. It's not changing. It's simply not changing. Although we have had a legislation from 1961, this is one of the deep structures of society that seems to be so difficult to change. Here you see a picture of the gender segregated labor market. Women in the services, men more in agriculture, fishery, and crafts and related trades, so on. Women's share of leadership in enterprises by size of enterprises, 2012, And you can see that the share of women is best in the small companies. But it will be very interesting to see what happens in the next coming years with the quotas. So, just jumping to my conclusions, we have gone through transformation in the last 50 years. Women have played a huge role in that transformation, and social movements have played very, very important roles. And last but not least, that Icelandic legislation secures equal rights for almost all kinds of families, single parents, same-sex parents, and families where parents live together, married or not married, or separated. They are equal. We have our problems. The population is getting older, and we have to deal with how are we going to provide all the old people. And the fertility rate is quite high, has been going a little bit down in the last few years due to the economic crisis, I think. And it's my conclusion that gender equality is the most effective tool to reach the goals of an equal society. And it's a smart business. It's a question of respecting human rights and creating a more equal and fair, it's supposed to be fair society. Sorry. There's some very strange word there. So that's what I was going to say. I will take part in the discussions afterward, and you can ask me questions. I've given you a lot of figures, and which you will, of course, forget. But I'd like to mention that outside there is this brochure here. In fact, it's Women and Men in Iceland 2014, with a lot of these interesting facts. So thank you very much.